event was that they went ahead and they wanted me to go with them to, once again, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And I know it was Fort Belvoir because they had one of the entities, one of our visitors that was left behind. And he was being held as a guest at this location in the wooded area. So I went there. And when I got there, he was sitting there. And they had guards all around the place. And as soon as I went in, he looked up at me. And when he looked up at me, you know, no one else could hear what was being said. Just like I say, I could hear it like you and I talking, but I could also feel it. He said, "I am afraid." And I could feel the fear, and I could also see, you know, his concern about seeing his family again. I said, "You know, there's no one going to hurt you." But, you know, he had that fear. So I went ahead and I said, "Well, what can I do?" He says, "My people are coming to get me. And if they come here, they're not going to try to hurt no one. But because of the technology to extract me from inside this building, many of your kind will die and be injured." And I went ahead and said, "Well, what can I do to avoid that? Should I tell them this?" No, they already know that that is a possibility. The ones that are here that know that. So I went ahead and said, "Okay, what can I do?" He says, "Try to help me get outside." So I went ahead, had a friend of mine bring over some wire cutters and place them out by the fenced in there because the building had a fence around it. And I went ahead and told the colonel, "Look, he's got to tell me something." But he says he will not do it because there's a little demonstration that goes along with it while any of the military is in here. I need the building completely cleared, and it's got to be just him and I. Reluctantly, the guy I always called the colonel, he cleared them. Once again, this alien was, I can't call it a typical gray, but the skin was a little lighter than a typical gray. The facial features was about the same. The head was not totally round, but, you know, echelon shape is the best way to put it. But you still had a definitive jaw and everything. The large eyes, but it had like a yellowish tint to it, if that makes any sense. But, you know, when he looked up at me, I felt everything he was feeling. If you miss your child, if you've had a person you miss, you got to understand they miss their family also the same way. But you feel it from their perspective. And it's hard to put into words. But, you know, you feel it, then your own emotions come into play. And at the same time, you know that this little creature is willing to give up its life because it doesn't want to see us be hurt or destroyed because they're coming to get him. They cleared the place, and I went ahead and told him to follow me, and we started to go out. Then, as we started to go down the hallway, I started to hear other people yelling, "Halt, halt, halt," and got to the point where they were saying, "Hold or we'll shoot." So I made him get in front of me. So he's in front of me, and we get out there, and I go ahead and I clip the fence as quickly and as fast as I could. He goes on out, and this craft comes over. And as the craft comes over, it was just like this bright light just shining down on the ground, and like when it goes off, he's no longer there. He's rescued. But I can remember, I was waiting to die that night because I heard people locking and loading their weapons. And I figured it's only a question of time before I'm going to get shot in the back because they're going to identify me as being a traitor. The colonel was very upset with me when I called the colonel. He was very upset with me. He just told me the next time, let us know what you're going to do. But I told him, you know, how do you keep guests under armed guards and call them guests? And situation is, I will never understand that. He was left behind by his own. We knew of a landing, and we immediately put a pounce operation where we immediately went to the area and was going to try to extract as much of the useful data we could get, even up to and including the craft, if possible. And I never liked that type of scenario. I never fully understood it, because the situation is where we're going to try to take a craft by force, and they do have the means to defend themselves, but they don't want to do that. And that was one of the biggest concerns I had, was what happens when we try to do that. But what happens is, if we come up on a craft and the visitors already have a rescue ship within the vicinity, then we go into what's called a holding pattern. We don't approach the ship. And on several occasions, they took, their people and left the craft there intact. So when we got there, we had a craft, the whole craft, but the people wasn't there. But then again, this is going to sound crazy, they felt that we were so immature, in the galactic sense of the word, that we could back engineer little bits and pieces of it, but we would never, ever be able to back engineer the whole craft. Well, I think we've back engineered enough to where we have certain technology where we tell people we can't do things. I have no inside knowledge whether we whether we have bases on the moon, or whether we have bases on Mars and Venus. But with that being said, I have no inside knowledge that that officially has occurred and that's officially happened. I know from the knowledge I have gained, the documentation that's there for anyone to read, the technology has existed all the way to at least the mid-50s, and probably long before that. Let me give you an example. Take a 2016 car. Take it back to 1776. And I have to use 1776 because there's a little understanding of technology at that time. We will understand how the lights on that car work. We won't be able to back engineer them, but we'll understand how. We will understand how the fuel works, but yet we are not going to have the technical capability to process oil out of the ground to make gasoline. We are going to be able to understand what plastic that's involved there, what it's all about, but we're never going to be able to replicate it. So this is where they're coming from.
All right, well, as you can tell, this is some pretty intense stuff, and I don't know about you, but I'm not looking at a guy who's lying here. You watch Clifford Stone, and there is credibility. Remember, he had a son who died, and that came out, which actually really stopped him from being a whistleblower for a long time. And the things that he's describing have those kind of really intense, specific details that people who make up stories and are lying just don't have. So, Corey, he mentioned that this ET was being held as a guest.
Right.
Is that kind of sanitized Big Brother type of lingo fairly common when they're holding someone prisoner?
Yeah. If you go somewhere, let's say you're delivering a message, and it's a group that are not friendly with the people you're bringing a message from, it's very often for you to be their guest in a room with no doorknobs while they figure out how they're going to respond.
Mm. Now, something that really kind of strikes me, almost like the scene in a movie, it's very cinematic, was this being describing to him that there would be some sort of event that would take place that would either hurt or kill many of the people in that base if he were to be extracted with their technology from inside the base. And then when he did see the extraction, it was some kind of bright beam of white light. I know it's just speculation, but could you speculate as to what are some of the technologies that might exist that could cause loss of life if someone was extracted from inside a building like that? Because, we think of Star Trek like a transport beam, that they can just beam you out from anywhere and it's the same thing.
And they can do that. I was a little confused about maybe that being was telling him that as a catalyst to get him moving. There could be technology that does that, but the technology I had seen and heard about was not going to cause damage inside of a building that it wouldn't cause outside of a building.
Well, here's one thing that I've wondered about. Could it be possible that this particular group of ETs is using some kind of torsion field beam that would basically be like a matter disruptor, so that if you're in the field of the beam, that perhaps the molecular bonds loosen up or something, and that could cause potentially electrical lines to cross over and then to set on fire larger areas of the building, cause an explosion or something like that. Are there beam technologies that could lead to those kinds of explosive events, perhaps?
What you're describing about is there are torsion weapons,
right, to
do that kind of thing. Now, I just can't see how them laying down light to change the being's molecular structure into that of the light and then pulling the light up. I don't see how that necessarily is going to cause a large loss of life. Maybe some damage to the building at most. But then again, this could be a technology that this group used that I haven't heard of.
Well,
or it could have been the being using that as a catalyst to get Sargento Stone to help him escape.
Why do you think the being might want to escape instead of just being beamed out from inside the building?
Well, I don't know. There could be some sort of shielding in the building. It depends. If they put certain types of shielding in the building, it disperses a lot of stuff or makes it hard to see who or what's inside.
Right. So the being might say that it's going to hurt people inside to appeal to Clifford's emotions,
and
when in fact the being itself might end up going through like a meat grinder if it was tried to be beamed out of that field that they've created inside that base.
Or the beam couldn't reach them at all. They could not be rescued at all unless they were brought outside of this whatever would buffer it.
Are you aware of there being such containment fields at these military bases that would disrupt those kinds of technologies so they wouldn't work inside?
Yes, but they're usually somewhat like bunkers. I've never heard of like a building sitting on top of the ground with barbed wire fence around it, shielded in such a manner, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Right, so there could be some willful deception going on behalf of the being just to ensure his safe passage, where he did deceive in order to be able to get into the safe transport area.
And
there was no real loss of life that might have occurred.
That's a possibility.
Right. Okay, now when he's describing the phenology of this being, the description is that it had a paler skin than most grays. It was whitish, but that he also described that it had a yellowish hue. Now, when we were watching this together and we weren't filming this, you mentioned something about their diet.
Yeah, the different grays their skin would change color if they were not getting the right diet when they were in captivity.
Really?
I don't know how long. It didn't sound like this being was in captivity that long, though.
How would the skin change color?
It becomes paler, and then almost white.
Wow. And do you know what it is that they're missing that we can't give them? What would they eat if they were here? It's
like us suffering from malnutrition. And I don't know what they eat. I've since read things on the internet about them absorbing things into their skin. There were dozens of different types of beings that looked like grays. So they don't all have the same biology.
Okay, now, I guess the other thing we should cover here is his very interesting statements about taking a car from 2016 back to 1776.
As long as Benjamin Franklin wasn't there, he probably could have reverse engineered a lot of it.
How do you feel about the idea that the ETs didn't think that we'd be able to do very much with their stuff and therefore allowed it to come down here?
Well, by this time, there has already been ongoing trade with a lot of these different beings, and we had developed technology equal to theirs. But
Clifford's obviously not on a need-to-know basis for that kind of intel.
So, if one of the things militarily we do, if we have a concept or a secret helicopter or craft that we can't extract, we will bomb it, destroy it. With them not destroying the craft left behind, I'm speculating that they didn't see a need to, because we've already developed on one level some of this technology.
Do you think that these beings might be, again, trying to steer our evolution and deliberately gift us this stuff so that we're going to get to where we need to be faster?
It could be. I mean, that definitely occurred, but it would have occurred earlier in history, I believe.
Okay, now one last thing is that he mentions a pounce team. And that term I've seen online in various declassified names of project codes, and I've seen reference to a project pounce. I'm wondering if you know anything about that.
Just like you, I remember reading that it was a program of mainly, I believe it was Army mainly, but they'll pull mixed services anytime they can to respond to satellites coming down, secret craft coming down, craft from foreign nations coming down, or unknowns coming down.
These pounce teams now have these gigantic C-5 Galaxy airplanes, and the plane will land at the nearest airfield, and then there's all these, they can hold like 500,000 or 1 million pounds, I guess, of content inside, that all these trucks come blasting out of the plane, and they immediately declare a perimeter around the area. So
that's a pounce operation.
That's a pounce operation. Yeah. Okay, so now what we're going to do is have another really fascinating video for you, this time of an encounter that Clifford had with UFOs and extraterrestrials in Vietnam. This is very fascinating stuff and gives you even more of a glimpse into the world that Clifford was brought into.
And when I got there, he was sitting there, and they had guards all around the place. And as soon as I went in, he looked up at me. And when he looked up at me, no one else could hear what was being said. Just like I say, I could hear it like you and I talking, but I could also feel it. He said, "I am afraid." And I could feel the fear, and I could also see, was that they went ahead and they wanted me to go with them to, once again, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And I know it was Fort Belvoir because they had one of the entities, one of our visitors, that was left behind. And he was being held as a guest at this location in the wooded area. So I went there. I was concerned about seeing his family again. I said, there's no one going to hurt you. But, he had that fear. So I went ahead, and I said, well, what can I do? He says, my people are coming to get me. And if they come here, they're not going to try to hurt no one. But because of the technology to extract me from inside this building, many of your kind will die and be injured. And I went ahead and said, what can I do to avoid that? Should I tell them this? No, they already know that is a possibility. The ones that are here that know that. So I went ahead and said, okay, what can I do? He says, try to help me get outside.